Spotify is such a huge thing for every artist. It seems to be so freaking important to get those followers, to get those streams. Spotify itself is almost a social media platform. Do you look at it as a social media platform, or is it incidental? And how do you work on increasing streams and increasing follower counts on Spotify for your artists through social media?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's, progressively become more and more of a social network in itself with Spotify for artists. And, when I'm creating assets now, in addition to creating for all of our primary socials, I need to create Spotify Canvas and headers and profile images for Spotify and all the various optimized graphics and video content respectively for that. So it's also a great way too to encourage band members to create playlists that you can curate across socials and to reach out and communicate with playlist curators to get placements for your band, because we get radio sends us updates weekly, and those account for a large percentage of where plays are coming from, through playlist curators, and whether it's Spotify branded or more independent, like we're seeing there's a large portion of them coming from both. So
awesome. Finn, can you talk about how you use Spotify? If you use Spotify, is there advantages inside the data that you can get from Spotify? How do you look upon Spotify in terms of social media?
Well, you guys all probably know more about Spotify than I do, since I don't actually distribute anything on there. So you guys would be a better source of information than I would. But what I do, as you said, it is more of a social platform all the time. So what I do, I realized people were always, when I make a video about, say, metalcore, pop punk or something, some particular flavor of it, people would ask, can you make a Spotify playlist of all the songs you mentioned? And so I started doing that. And, they're not huge or anything like that, but I have I don't know, I think the biggest one I have is maybe 10,000 followers or something, which isn't bad. And so to me, that's just, I'm not really aggressively trying to grow those playlists. I'm just using that as a way to deepen my relationship with the audience. Just another way for them to have a playlist. Like every time they open up Spotify and they see they have one of my playlists saved, they just remember me one more time. And also it's nice that some of them actually, I guess, are popular enough. I get a lot of outreach. I have one that's like emo rap stuff, which is not the biggest one by any means, but for some reason I get hit up a lot for that one. I don't know why, but it's cool that they're getting out there enough that people care. And I've actually gotten hit up by a couple artists, and I generally speak, this probably make me sound like a dick, but generally speaking, I absolutely hate it when people hit me up about my playlists because it happens so often and it's almost always garbage. But that one in particular, I've gotten hit up by a lot of pretty cool, good and substantial artists. And so the way I use Spotify is it's just sort of another, I would think of it as the seasoning on top of the main course for me personally. And those playlists, man, people care about them. That's the big thing I would take away from it. So if I was in a band, I would make a playlist about the genre that we are in with my band on it, knowing that people care about these things. That's what I would do.
Yeah, not to mention how you trick the algorithm, as they say. David, Spotify.
So I've been in a position where I started touring full time in 2007. My first band, the Crimson Armada, signed a very shitty, we were a tax write-off and didn't know it, to a big label. And we learned that later on. But I've never had to deal with submitting on my own because any band that I've been in has been signed to a label. I do believe, hands down, I know that anyone who's in a band thinks Spotify or DSPs suck, because we're all pigeonholed in contracts that pay us jack shit on them. But for any artist that's out there that's independent and owns their music, you can make a terrifying amount of money off of streams right now. Finn and I are both really close with Johnny Frank, whose project is Bill Murray. He and I grew up K through 12 together. Our dads were in bluegrass bands. And then Finn, I don't know how you guys connected. If you guys have just known each other from like being in the scene or back in the attack days or something.
Long story, Columbus, friends of friends.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot you lived in Columbus for a while. Okay, yes. So, Johnny is doing great, and I can't get into specific numbers or any of that stuff, but like he owns his music independently. His brand is goofy as hell, because he almost has that like he just doesn't care and does it because it's fun mentality. And he makes a living off of his streams outside of merch, outside of touring, outside of anything else. And there are so many artists that are doing that right now. I think Spotify creates more of an opportunity for bands this day and age that has existed in the past 7 to 10 years, realistically.
But how about like utilizing it as a social media platform or using
Right.
it as a way to social media gets people to
So the making it accessible is going to be one thing, whether it's Linktree, whatever. Make sure you're copying the URL from your actual page. Like don't put it through a bit URL or something. If I put an artist URL through like Bitly, then all of a sudden when someone clicks on it, it pulls it up in a browser. But if I pull it up just directly from the artist profile and then paste that, say into a Linktree or something along those lines, and you click on that, it'll pull it up in the user's native app. Which eliminates, 2 further steps for the user to make. If it pulls it up in a browser, they're going to have to close out of the browser or log in and then pull up the app and do it. It's all about the path of least resistance and making it accessible as possible. Something else that I think a lot of developing artists overlook is the metadata in your tracks are unbelievably important when it comes to securing any kind of playlisting. Metadata is basically just the text information that you're putting in about the song. Right? So who wrote the song? What BMI or ASCAP affiliation is there? Is there a guest vocalist? If so, what band? Whatever. It's essentially the product description for your track when you're entering it. A lot of bands will skip that over. Spotify won't consider a song if the metadata is inaccurate or if there's no metadata. To my knowledge, the other thing that a lot of bands mess up on is they'll submit the song for release like 3 or 4 days before the actual drop date, which doesn't even give it enough time to get in the Spotify playlist curator's queue to listen through the music. So it's recommended that you submit about 4 to 5 weeks out. And that actually puts the song in queue, which there's, actual people, the curators are actual people who sit there and listen to all this bullshit, most of which is probably bad. And then they think, hey, this one slaps, I'm going to put it on this playlist. But if you don't give it enough time to get through the queue, it's not likely that someone's going to happen to listen to it right away and throw it on there. So as far as like increasing your chances for organic playlisting, submit it 4 to 5 weeks out and make sure that the metadata when you enter it is as accurate as possible.
Awesome. Mike, can you take us home? How about this? Here's a question for you. Like during that album rollout, there are the social media posts that try to get people to go to the YouTube. There's the social media posts that direct to the Spotify. How are you as a manager trying to balance where those posts go to, or do you just not care as long as it's just getting out there so that people can get exposed to what the album that's being promoted?
No, I mean, we are focusing on what's immediately in front of us, and then how is that going to allow us to leverage our long-term goals. So if we're putting an album out, most likely we're going to want to get eyes and ears on videos, whether that's on YouTube or streams, whether that's Spotify or Apple Music. But inevitably, how are we then taking some of that data, as David describes, and then parlaying that into something? Because he said most bands I manage are signed to labels. That's not direct income back to us. So then we're focusing on things that are coming directly into our pocket, typically in the genres that we've been discussing. And Ice Nine Kills and is t-shirts or something else of that nature. I mean, the beautiful thing about this panel, and I'll try to wrap it up, is I see, it's so hard to actually do. To me, I couldn't go it alone, and I really couldn't do it without at least 2 of any of these guys that have been on the call with us today. I've got to have the band that's creating the content, right, where it's originating from, having that story that Finn likes to tell. Then I've got to have somebody advising, or, you know, at least on what the best content is for whatever the goals are. And then I've got to have somebody that's helping maximize that, you know, that data to reach the people that unfortunately aren't always reachable because of the way that the platforms are set up. So the good news is I don't find any fault in that. I think the business models are the business models, and I try to always encourage the artists, let's find a way to utilize, you know, the expertises that are out there. And again, I'm in a fortunate position. I haven't had to go watch all the videos and educate myself in the capacity that these guys have, because the artists I manage, we can actually afford these guys. But prior to doing all of that, right, I spent years and years doing similar things, just, you know, it wasn't really for the social media componentry of it. So, yeah, to me, the takeaway for any developing artist is, and really any established artist is, if you're willing to do the work and or have the resources to get in you know, in cahoots with any of these guys, you really can start to see returns that are so much greater than you know, would be if you weren't doing any of this stuff. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Jeff, David, Finn, Mike, thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate it. I mean, the information is just fantastic. So thank you so much for your time. Really
appreciate it from all of you guys. I'll follow
Thank
up.
you guys for having me, man. It really, I'm honored to be here.
Same here.
Rock and roll.
Thanks, Finn. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Dave.